I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong.
We always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
New Nubian. Conflict Resolution and Nonviolent Communication. Presented by Dr. Jonah Sanders. Course Objectives. To equip youth with practical tools and skills to de-escalate conflicts, communicate respectfully, and understand the difference between intent and impact in interpersonal interactions. Course Outline. Module 1, Active Listening Skills. Module 2, De-escalation Techniques. Module 3, Understanding Intent versus Impact. Module 4, Review and Commitment. Course Syllabus. Module Topic Time Learning Objectives. 1. Active listening techniques and practice 20 minutes. Develop skills to listen and empathize. 2. De-escalation calming conflict 20 minutes. Learn to reduce tension in interactions. 3. Intent versus impact awareness and responsibility 15 minutes. Understand and clarify communication effects. 4. Review and commitment reflection and goals 5 minutes. Commit to respectful, peaceful communication. Module 1. Active Listening Skills. Introduction to Active Listening. Objective: understand the basic concept of active listening. Content: define listening versus hearing. Explain why active listening is more than just hearing words. Examples of active versus passive listening. Activity: quick reflection. Students write down a time when they felt truly heard. The importance of active listening. Objective: learn why active listening is crucial in personal and professional contexts. Content: benefits of active listening in relationships, teamwork, and leadership. How it helps avoid misunderstandings. Its role in conflict resolution. Activity: group discussion. Students share examples where listening prevented a problem. Key components of active listening. Objective: identify the essential elements of active listening. Content: paying attention, body language, eye contact. Showing understanding, nodding, verbal affirmations. Providing feedback, paraphrasing, summarizing. Deferring judgment. Activity: short demonstration by instructor. Students identify components in sample conversation clips. Barriers to active listening. Objective: recognize obstacles that prevent effective listening. Content: common barriers, distractions, assumptions, emotional reactions. Cultural and language differences. Personal biases and internal noise. Activity. Students list their own barriers and discuss strategies to overcome them. Listening techniques. Objective: learn practical methods to improve active listening. Content: open-ended questions. Paraphrasing and summarizing. Reflective listening. Encouraging elaboration. Activity: role-playing exercises in pairs to practice these techniques. Nonverbal communication in listening. Objective: understand the role of nonverbal cues in active listening. Content: body language, facial expressions, and gestures. Tone of voice and pace. Signs that indicate attention and understanding. Activity: watch short video clips. Students identify positive and negative nonverbal cues. Listening in different contexts. Objective: apply active listening in various situations. Content: workplace, team meetings, one-on-one feedback. Personal life, family, friends. Online communication, emails, chats, video calls. Activity: scenario-based exercises to practice context-specific listening. Practicing mindful listening. Objective: develop focus and mindfulness for better listening. Content: techniques for mindfulness, deep breathing, clearing distractions. Staying present in the moment. Avoiding mental multitasking. Activity: guided mindful listening exercise with a short story or audio clip. Assessing and improving your listening skills. Objective: self-assess current listening habits and plan improvement. Content: self-evaluation tools, listening checklists, reflection journals. Peer feedback and observation. Setting personal listening goals. Activity: students complete a listening self-assessment worksheet. Summary and real-life application. Objective: consolidate learning and plan to implement active listening daily. Content: recap of definitions, importance, techniques, and barriers. Tips for making active listening a habit. Encouragement to practice daily in both personal and professional life. Activity: each student shares one concrete action they will take to improve listening in the next week. Introduction to listening techniques. Objective: understand the role of specific techniques in active listening. Content: brief recap of active listening principles. Introduce the 3 key techniques: paraphrasing, clarifying questions, empathy. Explain why these techniques improve understanding and connection. Activity: quick discussion. Students share times when they misunderstood someone due to not using these techniques. Paraphrasing, understanding the concept. Objective: learn what paraphrasing is and why it matters. Content. Definition: restating the speaker's message in your own words. Benefits: confirms understanding, shows attentiveness, prevents miscommunication. Activity: instructor demonstrates paraphrasing with a short story. Students identify the paraphrase versus original message. Practicing paraphrasing. Objective: apply paraphrasing in practice. Content: how to use neutral, non-judgmental language. Tips: focus on the speaker's main ideas, avoid adding opinions. Activity: pair exercise. One student shares a personal story, the other paraphrases, then they switch. Feedback is shared. Asking clarifying questions, understanding the concept. Objective: learn the importance of asking questions to clarify meaning. Content. Definition and purpose, remove ambiguity, confirm details, show interest. Difference between closed versus open-ended questions. Activity: students list situations where they could have avoided misunderstandings by asking clarifying questions. Practicing clarifying questions. Objective: develop skills for asking effective clarifying questions. Content. Techniques for framing questions politely and constructively. Avoid leading questions or interrupting. Activity: role-play exercises in pairs. One student shares a scenario, the other asks clarifying questions to fully understand. Showing empathy, understanding the concept. Objective: learn what empathy is in active listening. Content. Definition: recognizing and validating the speaker's emotions. Importance: builds trust, reduces conflict, strengthens relationships. Activity: group discussion, examples of empathetic versus non-empathetic responses. Practicing empathy. Objective: apply empathy in conversations. Content. Verbal cues: I understand that you feel. Nonverbal cues: tone, body language, facial expressions. Activity: students practice responding empathetically to peer-shared scenarios. Instructor provides feedback. Overcoming challenges. Objective: identify challenges in applying these techniques and strategies to overcome them. Content. Common challenges, distractions, emotional reactions, complex topics. Strategies: pause before responding, focus on speaker, practice regularly. Activity: students share personal challenges and brainstorm solutions in pairs or small groups. Real-life application and reflection. Objective: consolidate learning and plan practical use of techniques. Content. Review of all 3 techniques with key takeaways. Tips for daily practice in professional and personal contexts. Activity: each student commits to one real-life situation to apply these techniques during the next week and shares their plan with the group. Introduction to listening in tense situations. Objective: understand the role of listening in conflict resolution and tension diffusion. Content. Difference between hearing and active listening in tense situations. How being heard reduces frustration and defensiveness. Examples from workplace, personal, and social conflicts. Activity: students recall a recent conflict and reflect on whether listening played a role. Understanding sources of tension. Objective: identify what causes tension in communication. Content. Emotional triggers, misunderstandings, unmet expectations. Cultural and personality differences that may escalate tension. Activity: small group discussion, students list common triggers and share real-life examples. Active listening as a calming tool. Objective: learn how active listening reduces emotional intensity. Content. Listening conveys respect and acknowledgement. Helps the speaker feel validated, which naturally lowers tension. Key listening behaviors: eye contact, nodding, calm tone. Activity: instructor demonstrates a tense scenario, showing the difference between listening and ignoring. Techniques for listening in conflict. Objective: introduce specific techniques for diffusing tension. Content. Paraphrasing to show understanding. Asking clarifying questions to avoid assumptions. Reflecting emotions: it sounds like you're frustrated because. Activity: role play, one student expresses frustration, partner practices these techniques. Showing empathy in high-tension situations. Objective: learn the role of empathy in reducing tension. Content. Empathy signals recognition of feelings. Nonverbal cues, tone, gestures, posture, reinforce empathy. Avoiding judgment while being empathetic. Activity: students practice empathetic responses to emotionally charged statements. Avoiding escalation while listening. Objective: recognize behaviors that worsen tension and how to prevent them. Content: interrupting, arguing, dismissing feelings. Maintaining calm, neutral body language. Using pauses and silence effectively. Activity: students watch short video examples of escalated versus diffused conversations and analyze strategies used. Combining listening techniques. Objective: apply multiple listening strategies to diffuse tension. Content: listen, paraphrase, ask clarifying questions, show empathy, respond calmly. The sequence helps maintain a constructive conversation. Activity: group exercise, practice handling a scripted tense scenario using all techniques. Handling strong emotions. Objective: develop skills for listening when emotions run high. Content: strategies to remain composed under anger, frustration, or sadness. Using grounding techniques, deep breathing, mindful attention. Keeping focus on the speaker's message rather than personal reaction. Activity: students practice responding to emotional statements while staying calm and validating feelings. Reflection and self-awareness. Objective: reflect on personal listening habits during tense moments. Content: self-assessment of listening skills in stressful situations. Identifying triggers that make it hard to listen. Planning improvements. Activity: students complete a self-reflection worksheet on past conflicts and share strategies for improvement. Real-life application and action plan. Objective: consolidate learning and plan to apply techniques in daily life. Content: review key strategies, active listening, empathy, paraphrasing, clarifying questions. Discuss importance of practice in personal, workplace, and social situations. Activity: each student commits to one situation in the upcoming week where they will apply these techniques and shares their plan with a partner or group. Introduction to paired practice. Objective: understand the purpose and structure of paired practice exercises. Content: benefits of practicing active listening in pairs. Overview of the exercises: sharing, paraphrasing, asking questions, showing empathy. Guidelines for respectful and constructive interaction. Activity: icebreaker. Students introduce themselves briefly and share a recent experience that required listening. Setting listening goals. Objective: define personal goals for the practice session. Content: identifying strengths and areas for improvement in listening. Deciding which techniques to focus on, paraphrasing, clarifying questions, empathy. Activity: each student writes down 2 to 3 listening goals for the paired exercises. Warm-up listening exercise. Objective: start practicing basic active listening skills. Content: focus on paying attention fully and avoiding interruptions. Practice neutral body language and eye contact. Activity: pair up, one student speaks for 2 minutes about a topic, the other listens without responding, then reflects briefly on what they heard. Paraphrasing practice. Objective: practice restating what the partner says to ensure understanding. Content: techniques for paraphrasing accurately and neutrally. Avoid inserting personal opinions or judgments. Activity: students take turns speaking, listener paraphrases and checks for accuracy. Feedback is given. Clarifying questions practice. Objective: practice asking questions to clarify meaning. Content: difference between open-ended and closed-ended questions. When and how to ask clarifying questions effectively. Activity: partner A shares a story, partner B asks clarifying questions to fully understand. Partners switch roles. Empathy in paired practice. Objective: practice expressing understanding of the partner's emotions. Content: verbal and nonverbal cues to show empathy. How empathy improves connection and trust. Activity: students respond to each other's stories with empathetic statements, e.g., "It sounds like that situation was really challenging for you." Combining techniques. Objective: integrate paraphrasing, clarifying questions, and empathy in a single conversation. Content: how to sequence techniques naturally during a conversation. Maintaining a balanced flow between speaking and listening. Activity: paired role play with one student presenting a scenario and the other using all techniques. Feedback is given. Handling difficult conversations. Objective: practice listening in scenarios that might be tense or emotional. Content: strategies to stay calm and focused under pressure. Using active listening to reduce misunderstandings. Activity: pairs role-play a conflict scenario, practicing active listening to diffuse tension. Debrief afterward. Reflection on practice. Objective: reflect on learning from paired exercises. Content: self-assessment, what worked well, what needs improvement. Peer feedback, sharing observations and encouragement. Activity: students write reflections on their listening strengths and areas for growth, then discuss in pairs. Module 2. De-escalation techniques. Real-life application and action plan. Objective: plan how to continue practicing active listening in daily life. Content: tips for applying techniques with friends, family, and colleagues. Setting measurable goals for ongoing practice. Activity: each student sets one concrete listening goal for the week and shares it with the group for accountability. Introduction to conflict escalation. Objective: understand what conflict escalation is and why recognizing it matters. Content: definition of conflict escalation. How unresolved conflicts intensify tension. Importance of early recognition to prevent escalation. Activity: students reflect on a past situation that escalated and share what signs they missed. Stages of conflict escalation. Objective: learn the typical stages through which conflict escalates. Content: Stage 1, discomfort and tension. Stage 2, verbal disagreements. Stage 3, open conflict and aggression. Stage 4, potential physical or emotional harm. Activity: group discussion. Students identify examples of each stage from real life or media examples. Verbal signs of escalation. Objective: recognize verbal indicators that a conflict is intensifying. Content: tone of voice changes, raised voices, sarcasm, threats. Language: blaming, accusations, generalizations, you always. Interruptions or refusing to listen. Activity: watch video clips or listen to audio examples of escalating conversations. Students identify verbal signs. Nonverbal signs of escalation. Objective: identify nonverbal cues indicating rising tension. Content: body language, clenched fists, crossing arms, pacing. Facial expressions, frowning, glaring, tight lips. Physiological cues, flushed face, rapid breathing. Activity: students pair up and act out escalating scenarios. Partners identify nonverbal signals. Emotional signs of escalation. Objective: understand emotional cues that signal potential escalation. Content: signs of anger, frustration, fear, or anxiety. Recognizing personal triggers and emotional reactions. How emotions can influence behavior in conflict. Activity: self-reflection exercise. Students identify their emotional triggers and share strategies for recognizing emotions in others. Environmental and contextual triggers. Objective: recognize external factors that contribute to conflict escalation. Content: stressful environments, crowded spaces, deadlines, noise. Power dynamics, hierarchy, social pressures. Cultural and communication differences. Activity, small group discussion. Students identify scenarios where environment contributed to conflict escalation. Early warning signals. Objective, learn how to detect early signs of escalation to intervene promptly. Content. Behavioral changes, withdrawal, agitation, sarcasm. Subtle cues, hesitation, avoiding eye contact, tense posture. Importance of continuous observation and active listening. Activity, scenario-based activity. Students role-play early warning detection in short conversations. Assessing risk levels. Objective, evaluate which conflicts may escalate into serious issues. Content. Factors that increase risk, past history, high emotions, stakes involved. Categorizing conflicts, low, moderate, high risk. Deciding when to intervene or seek help. Activity, case study analysis. Students assess sample conflict situations and determine the risk level. Strategies for initial response. Objective, learn techniques to respond to early signs of escalation. Content. Stay calm and composed. Use neutral language. Ask clarifying questions and acknowledge feelings. Activity, pair practice. One student acts as the escalating party, the other practices initial de-escalation responses. Reflection and action plan. Objective, consolidate learning and prepare for real-life application. Content. Review key signs of escalating conflict. Emphasize proactive observation and intervention. Create a personal plan to notice and respond to conflict signs. Activity, students write a one-week action plan, situations to watch for, personal strategies to intervene, and reflection on past conflicts to improve response. Introduction to calming strategies. Objective, understand the importance of verbal and non-verbal strategies in de-escalation. Content. Why responding appropriately reduces tension. Differences between verbal and non-verbal calming methods. Overview of the lesson and practical goals. Activity, brief discussion. Students share times when a calm response prevented conflict from escalating. Principles of verbal de-escalation. Objective, learn basic verbal strategies to calm tense situations. Content. Use calm, neutral tone. Avoid accusatory or judgmental language. Speak slowly and clearly. Use reassuring and empathetic statements. Activity, students practice converting aggressive statements into neutral or calming responses. Techniques for effective verbal communication. Objective, apply verbal strategies in practice. Content. Asking open-ended questions. Paraphrasing to show understanding. Using I statements instead of you statements. Activity, pair exercise. One student describes a stressful scenario, the other responds using verbal de-escalation techniques. Principles of nonverbal de-escalation. Objective, understand the role of body language, tone, and facial expressions. Content. Maintain relaxed posture and open gestures. Eye contact, how much is appropriate. Facial expressions, calm, attentive, and non-threatening. Activity, students observe and mimic nonverbal cues demonstrated by the instructor. Techniques for effective nonverbal communication. Objective, practice using nonverbal strategies to calm situations. Content. Controlled breathing to convey calmness. Using pauses and silence effectively. Respecting personal space to reduce perceived threat. Activity, role-play exercises where students respond only with nonverbal strategies. Partners provide feedback. Combining verbal and nonverbal strategies. Objective, integrate verbal and nonverbal techniques for maximum effect. Content. Synchronizing tone, words, and body language. Ensuring consistency to avoid mixed signals. Activity, paired role-play with escalating scenarios, students respond using both verbal and nonverbal strategies simultaneously. Active listening as a de-escalation tool. Objective, use active listening to calm tense situations. Content. Paraphrasing, clarifying questions, and showing empathy. Listening to underlying emotions, not just words. How acknowledgement reduces defensive behavior. Activity, students practice active listening in pairs, focusing on de-escalating tension. Handling emotional outbursts. Objective, apply strategies to situations where emotions are high. Content. Recognizing when someone is highly emotional. Responding without escalating, maintaining calm presence. Using grounding techniques for self and others. Activity, simulated scenarios. One student expresses anger or frustration, the other practices verbal and nonverbal calming strategies. Assessing effectiveness. Objective, evaluate and improve use of calming strategies. Content. Observing partner's response to your strategies. Adjusting tone, words, or body language based on feedback. Self-reflection on what worked and what didn't. Activity, students review recorded role-play, or peer feedback, to assess effectiveness of their verbal and nonverbal strategies. Real-life application and action plan. Objective: consolidate learning and plan to apply strategies in real life. Content: review key verbal and non-verbal strategies. Discuss practical application in workplace, family, and social settings. Emphasize consistent practice for skill improvement. Activity: each student creates a personal action plan, situations to practice calming strategies, techniques to focus on, and reflection notes for improvement. Introduction to de-escalation communication. Objective: understand the role of I statements and calmness in managing conflict. Content: why communication style matters under pressure. Difference between blaming, you, and I statements. Overview of the lesson's focus and goals. Activity: discussion. Students share times when conversations escalated due to blaming language. Understanding I statements. Objective: learn what I statements are and why they are effective. Content: definition and components: I feel, emotion, when, situation, because, reason. How I statements reduce defensiveness and encourage dialogue. Activity: students convert common you statements into I statements in small groups. Practicing I statements. Objective: apply I statements in role-play scenarios. Content: emphasizing honesty without blame. Keeping statements concise and focused. Activity: paired practice. One student shares a conflict scenario, the other responds using I statements. Feedback is provided. Recognizing emotional triggers. Objective: identify triggers that make it difficult to stay calm. Content: common triggers: criticism, perceived injustice, personal stress. How awareness of triggers helps maintain control. Activity: self-reflection exercise. Students list personal triggers and strategies to manage reactions. Techniques to stay calm under pressure. Objective: learn practical methods to maintain composure. Content: breathing exercises and grounding techniques. Mental reframing, separating person from behavior. Maintaining neutral body language and tone. Activity: guided breathing and visualization exercises to practice calming under simulated pressure. Combining I statements with calmness. Objective: integrate verbal and emotional control in conflict situations. Content: how calm tone amplifies the effectiveness of I statements. Timing and pacing your responses. Activity: role play. One student presents a tense scenario, the other responds using both calmness and I statements. Handling high-pressure situations. Objective, apply strategies in real-world stressful or emotional contexts. Content. Responding to anger or criticism without escalation. Balancing assertiveness with empathy. Avoiding reactive statements under stress. Activity. Simulated high-pressure scenarios. Students practice staying calm and using I statements. Observing and learning from others. Objective, learn through observation and feedback. Content. Watching peers or video examples to identify effective techniques. Noting posture, tone, and wording in real interactions. Activity, students watch a recorded conflict scenario, identify how I statements and calm responses were applied or could have been applied. Self-reflection and assessment. Objective, evaluate personal progress and readiness to apply techniques. Content. Self-assessment, confidence in using I statements and staying calm. Identifying strengths and areas for improvement. Activity, students complete a reflection worksheet and discuss insights in pairs. Real-life application and action plan. Objective, consolidate learning and create a practical plan for ongoing use. Content. Review key strategies, I statements, calming techniques, emotional awareness. Planning real-world application in workplace, family, and social interactions. Activity, each student develops a one-week action plan specifying situations to practice, techniques to focus on, and methods to evaluate effectiveness. Introduction to role-play in de-escalation. Objective, understand the purpose and benefits of role-playing for practicing de-escalation. Content. Why practice is essential for developing real-world de-escalation skills. Overview of role-play structure and expectations. Safe and supportive environment guidelines. Activity, icebreaker, students share past experiences of conflict and what could have been done differently. Setting personal goals. Objective, define individual learning objectives for the role-play activity. Content. Identifying skills to improve, calmness, I statements, empathy, listening. Selecting specific techniques to focus on during exercises. Activity, students write down 2 to 3 personal goals for the role-play session. Demonstration of a de-escalation roleplay. Objective, observe a model scenario demonstrating effective de-escalation. Content. Instructor roleplays a conflict scenario, showing verbal and nonverbal techniques. Emphasize tone, body language, empathy, and active listening. Activity, students identify strategies used in the demonstration and discuss why they were effective. Role-play pairing and scenario assignment. Objective: prepare students for paired practice with assigned scenarios. Content: explanation of scenario types, workplace conflict, family disagreement, customer complaints, peer disagreements. Assign pairs and roles, escalating party, de-escalating party. Activity: students review scenario instructions and prepare to act out their roles. First round of role-play. Objective: practice initial de-escalation skills in a controlled environment. Content: focus on listening, staying calm, and using neutral language. Apply techniques like I statements, paraphrasing, and acknowledging emotions. Activity: paired role-play for 5 to 7 minutes per scenario, swap roles and repeat. Feedback and reflection. Objective: reflect on first round and receive constructive feedback. Content: importance of peer and instructor feedback. Identifying strengths and areas for improvement. Activity: partners provide feedback, instructor highlights key learning points for each pair. Second round of role-play, increased complexity. Objective: practice de-escalation in more challenging scenarios. Content: introduce additional stressors, higher emotions, multiple issues, or time pressure. Encourage integration of multiple de-escalation techniques. Activity: paired role-play with new, more complex scenarios, rotate partners if possible. Observational learning. Objective: learn from observing peers' role-play performances. Content: observers note verbal and non-verbal strategies used, emotional responses, and effectiveness. Group discussion on best practices and lessons learned. Activity: students watch two pairs and provide observations, discussing what strategies worked well and why. Self-reflection and personal assessment. Objective: evaluate personal performance and identify ongoing improvement areas. Content: reflect on comfort, effectiveness, and application of strategies. Compare self-perception with peer feedback. Activity: students complete a reflection worksheet, strengths, weaknesses, and techniques to focus on. Real-life application and action plan. Objective: consolidate learning and create a practical plan for continued skill development. Content: recap of key strategies practiced, verbal, non-verbal, listening, empathy, I statements, calmness. Plan for applying role-play lessons in personal, professional, and social interactions. Activity: students write a 1-week action plan specifying situations to practice de-escalation techniques and share with the group for accountability. Module 3. Understanding intent versus impact. Introduction to intent and impact. Objective: understand the importance of differentiating between intent and impact in communication. Content: definition of intent, the purpose or meaning behind a message. Definition of impact, how the message is perceived or received by others. Why the distinction matters in preventing misunderstandings. Activity: students reflect on a past communication that caused unintended impact and share insights. Examples of misaligned intent and impact. Objective: recognize situations where intent and impact differ. Content: common workplace, family, and social examples. How assumptions and perceptions shape impact. Emotional responses triggered by unintended impact. Activity: group discussion, students provide examples from personal experience. Factors affecting impact. Objective: identify factors that influence how communication is received. Content: tone, body language, choice of words. Cultural and contextual differences. Emotional state of the sender and receiver. Activity: students analyze sample statements and discuss how delivery changes impact. Recognizing your own intent. Objective: develop awareness of your own communication intent. Content: reflecting on purpose before speaking. Aligning words and nonverbal cues with intended message. Activity: students practice crafting statements for clarity of intent in pairs and discuss alignment. Observing and interpreting impact. Objective: learn to observe the impact of your communication on others. Content: listening for verbal and nonverbal cues from others. Paying attention to feedback and reactions. Activity: role play, one student delivers a message, the other provides feedback on perceived impact. Bridging the gap between intent and impact. Objective: strategies for aligning intent with impact. Content: clarifying your message before speaking. Adjusting language, tone, and nonverbal cues to match intent. Asking for feedback to ensure understanding. Activity: students revise statements from Section 4 to better align intent and impact and practice delivery. Handling misunderstandings. Objective: Manage situations when impact differs from intent. Content. Steps for responding to unintended impact: acknowledge, clarify, and apologize if needed. Avoiding defensiveness while maintaining your perspective. Activity: pair exercise. Simulate a situation where intent was misunderstood and practice corrective communication. Cultural and contextual considerations. Objective: understand how culture and context influence intent and impact. Content. Examples of cross-cultural miscommunication. Adapting messages to different audiences and contexts. Activity: group discussion. Students share examples where context altered the impact of their message. Reflection and self-assessment. Objective: reflect on personal communication habits regarding intent and impact. Content. Self-assessment of common misunderstandings. Identifying areas for improvement in clarity and delivery. Activity: students complete a reflection worksheet and discuss insights with a partner. Real-life application and action plan. Objective: plan practical application of intent-impact awareness in daily communication. Content. Key takeaways for aligning intent and impact. Strategies for continuous improvement in personal and professional settings. Activity: each student writes an action plan, situations to practice aligning intent with impact, techniques to use, and methods to check understanding. How misunderstandings arise and ways to clarify meaning. Objective: understand the concept of misunderstandings in communication. Content. Definition: when the intended message differs from what is received. Why misunderstandings are common in personal and professional contexts. Importance of recognizing and addressing misunderstandings early. Activity: students share examples of past misunderstandings and their outcomes. Causes of misunderstandings. Objective: identify factors that lead to miscommunication. Content. Differences in language, tone, and word choice. Assumptions and preconceived notions. Emotional states, stress, and distractions. Activity: group discussion. List potential causes of misunderstandings in workplace and social settings. Impact of misunderstandings. Objective: recognize the consequences of unclear communication. Content. Frustration, conflict, and damaged relationships. Lost productivity or errors in professional settings. Misinterpretation of intent leading to defensiveness or hurt feelings. Activity: students analyze real-life case studies highlighting the impact of misunderstandings. The role of perception. Objective, understand how perception affects communication. Content. How individuals interpret words differently based on experience and context. The role of bias and prior assumptions in shaping impact. Activity, paired activity. Students read ambiguous statements and discuss how interpretations differ. Strategies to clarify meaning, active listening. Objective, learn listening techniques that reduce misunderstandings. Content. Paraphrasing, summarizing, and reflecting back. Asking open-ended and clarifying questions. Paying attention to nonverbal cues. Activity, role play. One student speaks about a topic, the other practices clarifying meaning through active listening. Using I statements to avoid misinterpretation. Objective, apply I statements to communicate clearly. Content. Structure, I feel, emotion, when, situation, because, reason. How this reduces defensiveness and clarifies intent. Activity, students convert ambiguous or blaming statements into clear I statements. Asking effective questions. Objective, learn techniques for seeking clarification. Content. Types of clarifying questions, open versus closed. Timing and phrasing to avoid escalating tension. Activity, students practice asking clarifying questions in pairs based on sample statements. Nonverbal communication and its role. Objective, understand how body language and tone affect understanding. Content. Common nonverbal cues that can create misunderstandings. Aligning verbal and nonverbal signals for clarity. Activity, watch short video clips of conversations. Students identify mismatches between words and body language. Real-life application and action plan. Objective, consolidate learning and plan strategies to prevent misunderstandings. Content. Review key strategies, active listening, I statements, clarifying questions, nonverbal alignment. Planning practical application in workplace, family, and social interactions. Activity, students create a personal action plan, situations to practice clarifying meaning, techniques to focus on, and methods to evaluate success. Introduction to impact responsibility. Objective, understand why taking responsibility for impact is crucial in communication. Content. Definition of impact versus intent. How focusing only on intent can harm relationships. The value of accountability in personal and professional interactions. Activity, group discussion, share examples where intent was good but impact was harmful. The difference between intent and impact. Objective, deepen understanding of the distinction and interplay. Content. Intent, what you meant to communicate. Impact, how your message was received or interpreted. Why impact matters more than intent in maintaining trust and respect. Activity, students analyze statements and discuss how impact differs from intent in each case. Recognizing when impact is negative. Objective, learn to identify the consequences of your communication on others. Content. Verbal cues, defensive responses, disagreements, confusion. Nonverbal cues, withdrawal, agitation, body language changes. Emotional signals, hurt, frustration, discomfort. Activity, role-play observation, one student delivers a statement, peers identify potential negative impacts. Why responsibility matters. Objective, explore the benefits of taking responsibility for impact. Content. Builds trust and credibility. Reduces conflict and misunderstandings. Encourages open, respectful communication. Activity, case study discussion, examples where taking responsibility resolved tension effectively. Strategies for taking responsibility. Objective, learn practical ways to accept responsibility for impact. Content. Acknowledge the impact without defensiveness. Express empathy for how others feel. Avoid justifying intent, focus on repair and understanding. Activity, students rewrite statements that caused unintended impact to show accountability. Communicating accountability. Objective, practice language and behavior that conveys responsibility. Content. Using statements like, "I realize my words had this effect." Maintaining calm and respectful tone. Aligning verbal and nonverbal cues for sincerity. Activity, paired role play, one student practices acknowledging impact, the other responds with feedback. Handling emotional responses. Objective, learn to respond effectively when impact causes strong emotions. Content. Recognizing others' emotional reactions. Techniques for maintaining composure and empathy. Avoiding defensiveness or shifting blame. Activity, simulated conflict, students practice acknowledging impact while managing the other person's emotional response. Preventing unintentional negative impact. Objective, develop habits to minimize future misunderstandings. Content. Pausing before responding. Checking for clarity and alignment of intent and words. Seeking feedback from others on communication style. Activity, students draft sample statements on sensitive topics, then peer review for potential impact. Reflection and self-assessment. Objective, reflect on personal communication patterns and accountability. Content. Identifying situations where you may have caused unintended impact. Assessing willingness to take responsibility. Setting goals for more mindful communication. Activity, complete a self-reflection worksheet and discuss insights in pairs or small groups. Real-life application and action plan. Objective, consolidate learning and create a practical plan for ongoing improvement. Content. Review key strategies, acknowledge impact, express empathy, align words and actions. Plan to apply accountability in personal, professional, and social interactions. Activity. Students write a one-week action plan detailing situations to practice taking responsibility for impact, techniques to use, and ways to evaluate effectiveness. Setting the stage for sharing. Objective, establish a safe, respectful environment for open dialogue. Content. Why sharing personal experiences helps learning. Ground rules, respect, confidentiality, listening without judgment. Encouraging participants to share voluntarily. Activity, facilitator introduces session purpose, group agrees on discussion norms. Warming up, mini examples. Objective, ease participants into reflection by starting small. Content. Encourage short examples. One time I said something and it wasn't received how I meant. Focus on simple, non-sensitive examples. Activity, round-robin sharing, each person gives a quick 1-minute example. Deep dive example sharing. Objective, explore real situations in depth. Content. Volunteers share a full example of when their intent differed from the impact. Emphasis on describing both perspectives. Activity, after each example, group reflects, what was the intent? What was the impact? Where was the gap? Reflection on listening. Objective, highlight the role of active listening in group discussion. Content. How listening without interruption makes people feel heard. Why reflective listening strengthens trust in sharing. Activity, group pauses to reflect, how did it feel to share? How did it feel to listen? Deep dive example sharing. Objective, continue exploring, with more voices included. Content. Invite new participants to share their examples. Encourage variety, work, family, school, friendships. Activity, after sharing, group identifies lessons. What could have clarified the message? How could the impact have been acknowledged? Group theming, common patterns. Objective, identify shared themes across different examples. Content. Common causes of misunderstanding, tone, assumptions, timing, cultural differences. Emotional impacts, frustration, hurt, confusion. Activity, facilitator maps examples on a board/flipchart into themes, e.g., misinterpreted humor, lack of clarity, ignoring nonverbal cues. Small group reflection. Objective, give participants space for more intimate reflection. Content. Participants break into pairs or trios. Discuss what they've noticed in their own communication from the group examples. Activity, each small group answers, what's one way I might unintentionally cause a negative impact, and how could I respond differently? Sharing insights back to group. Objective, bring personal reflections back into collective learning. Content. Each group shares one key takeaway. Facilitator highlights links between insights and course concepts. Activity, collective brainstorming on ways to close the intent-impact gap, captured visibly on board. Emotional reflections. Objective, process feelings connected to sharing and hearing other stories. Content. Recognizing vulnerability in sharing. How empathy grows from hearing others' experiences. The role of compassion in responsible communication. Activity, group reflection round, what surprised me? What did I feel most connected to? Consolidation and action planning. Objective, turn reflections into practical communication habits. Content. Summarize key lessons from group sharing. Reinforce, intent matters, but impact is what people experience. Encourage responsibility and empathy moving forward. Activity, each participant writes down one insight from today's discussion. One action they will apply this week to reduce intent-impact gaps. Optional, share commitments with the group for accountability. Module 4. Review and Commitment. Setting the stage, why review matters. Objective, emphasize the importance of reviewing and reinforcing learning. Content. Conflict resolution is not one-time knowledge, it's a skill that requires practice. Reviewing strengthens memory and builds confidence. Today's session will consolidate everything learned so far. Activity, group brainstorm, why is reviewing past lessons valuable in real-life conflict situations? Big picture of conflict resolution. Objective, revisit the overall framework. Content. Conflict escalation cycle. Stages of de-escalation. Role of communication, listening, and empathy. Activity. Facilitator draws a conflict resolution roadmap on the board and participants contribute examples for each stage. Active listening review. Objective, reconnect with foundational listening skills. Content. Active listening techniques, paraphrasing, clarifying questions, empathy. Why listening diffuses tension. Activity, quick paired exercise, one shares a 1-minute story, the other practices paraphrasing. Switch roles. Debrief, how did it feel to be listened to? Verbal and nonverbal strategies. Objective, highlight calming communication tools. Content. Tone, body language, and word choice. The role of I statements in avoiding blame. Activity, group demonstration, compare the same message said with calm versus aggressive tone. Discuss differences in impact. Recognizing triggers and escalation signs. Objective, refresh awareness of early conflict signals. Content. Physical, emotional, and behavioral signs of escalation. How early recognition prevents conflict from worsening. Activity, scenario practice, facilitator describes a tense situation, group identifies red flags. Techniques for staying calm under pressure. Objective, review self-management tools. Content. Breathing techniques, pausing before speaking, reframing thoughts. Importance of emotional regulation. Activity, guided 2-minute breathing exercise, then discussion on when participants could use it in real life. Conflict resolution approaches, collaborative focus. Objective, summarize resolution approaches with an emphasis on win-win. Content. Avoiding, accommodating, competing, compromising, collaborating. Strengths and limitations of each. Activity, group discussion, which approach do you naturally use? Which one would you like to strengthen? Role of intent versus impact in resolution. Objective, connect communication awareness to resolution. Content. Misunderstandings from intent versus impact. Taking responsibility for impact regardless of intent. Activity, small groups share examples of when their intent was misunderstood. Then reflect, how could this have been handled differently? Pulling it together, strategy recap. Objective, create a concise toolkit of strategies. Content. Review all major strategies learned. Active listening. Nonverbal/verbal calmness. I statements. Recognizing escalation signs. Staying calm under pressure. Collaborative resolution. Stress the idea that strategies work best when combined. Activity. As a group, co-create a conflict resolution checklist to summarize all strategies. Reflection and commitment. Objective, ensure long-term integration through personal commitment. Content. Review session highlights. Reinforce the power of daily practice. Activity. Each participant writes down one strategy they already use well. One strategy they will commit to practicing in the next week. Closing circle, voluntary sharing of commitments. Introduction, why commit to respectful communication? Objective, set the tone for the session by explaining why commitment matters. Content. Respectful communication builds trust, reduces conflict, and improves collaboration. Making a personal commitment strengthens accountability. Activity, facilitator asks, think of one time when respectful communication changed the outcome of a situation. What made it effective? Short group sharing. Revisiting the foundations of respectful communication. Objective, refresh learners' understanding of key principles. Content. Active listening, empathy, I statements, tone, body language. Avoiding blame, judgment, or interruption. Activity, small group brainstorm, what words or actions make you feel respected in a conversation? Create a word cloud or list. Identifying barriers to respectful communication. Objective, recognize what prevents us from staying respectful. Content. Common barriers, stress, assumptions, cultural differences, lack of self-awareness. How emotional triggers make us react instead of respond. Activity, reflection journal, what situations make it hard for me to stay respectful? How do I usually respond? Role of self-awareness in commitment. Objective, show how self-awareness is the first step toward commitment. Content. Recognizing personal triggers. Monitoring tone, body language, and emotional state. Activity, self-check exercise. Participants list 3 personal communication habits they want to keep and 3 they want to improve. Modeling respectful communication in practice. Objective, demonstrate what respectful communication looks and sounds like. Content. Respect is shown not just in words, but in delivery. Examples, I feel concerned when deadlines are missed, versus, you never finish on time. Activity, pairs role-play, disrespectful, versus, respectful, versions of the same message. Debrief as a group. Connecting respectful communication to conflict resolution. Objective, link respectful communication to de-escalation and resolution. Content. Respect prevents defensiveness. Respect helps keep dialogue open and constructive. Activity, case study review. Participants analyze a short scenario where respect either diffused or escalated tension. Making commitment personal. Objective, guide participants to think of personal communication goals. Content. A commitment should be clear, actionable, and specific, e.g., I will pause before responding when I feel upset. It should focus on behaviors, not vague ideals. Activity, guided reflection, write down 2 to 3 possible commitments to improve respectful communication. Sharing commitments with the group. Objective, create accountability through sharing. Content. Sharing commitments reinforces responsibility. Peers can encourage and inspire each other. Activity, round-robin style, each participant shares 1 commitment aloud. Group listens respectfully without judgment. Peer feedback and encouragement. Objective, strengthen commitments through group support. Content. Encouragement helps sustain new behaviors. Respectful feedback should be affirming and constructive. Activity, after each person shares, 1 to 2 peers give encouragement, that's a strong commitment. One tip you might find helpful is reflection and closing, moving forward with commitment. Objective, consolidate learning and prepare for real-world practice. Content. Revisit key strategies, listening, empathy, calm tone, I statements. Encourage daily practice and self-monitoring. Activity. Silent reflection, what will success look like for me if I follow through on my commitment for 1 week? Group closing circle where each participant repeats their commitment 1 final time. Introduction, why a toolkit and guide matter. Objective, explain why tools and guides are helpful after training. Content. A toolkit provides quick strategies when emotions are high. A communication guide serves as a daily reference to keep respectful communication consistent. These resources reinforce learning beyond the classroom. Activity, facilitator asks, have you ever forgotten a skill you learned in a workshop because you didn't have notes or reminders? Group reflection. Overview of the Conflict Resolution Toolkit. Objective, present the main components of the toolkit. Content. De-escalation checklist, pause, breathe, lower tone. I statement examples. Conflict mapping worksheet, list issues, emotions, needs. Steps for mediation, listen, clarify, propose, agree. Activity, Walk through the toolkit with printed or digital copies, highlighting each section. Overview of the communication guide. Objective: explain how the guide complements the toolkit. Content: respectful communication principles, listen, clarify, empathize. Nonverbal do's and don'ts. Tips for cross-cultural sensitivity. Reflection prompts for after conversations. Activity: learners highlight 2 to 3 guide sections they find most useful. Deep dive, the escalation checklist. Objective: show how to use the checklist in heated moments. Content. Steps: stop, breathe, listen, lower tone, show empathy, respond. Why pausing reduces escalation. Activity: practice, each participant role-plays responding to a tense statement using the checklist. Deep dive, using I statements. Objective: practice expressing needs without blame. Content. Formula: I feel, emotion, when, situation, because, reason. I need, solution. Contrast with blame statements, you always. Activity: participants rewrite accusatory statements into I statements from the guide. Deep dive, conflict mapping worksheet. Objective: learn to break down conflict step by step. Content. Mapping issues, emotions, underlying needs, and possible solutions. How this tool helps organize chaotic conversations. Activity: case study, small groups complete a sample conflict mapping worksheet together. Deep dive, mediation steps. Objective: explore how to structure conflict resolution discussions. Content. Step 1, listening without interruption. Step 2, clarifying meaning. Step 3, generating solutions. Step 4, agreeing on action steps. Activity: triad practice, 1 person mediator, 2 role-play disputants. Rotate roles. Applying the communication guide daily. Objective: show how the guide works outside conflicts. Content. Using respectful communication at work, home, or school. Daily self-check questions: did I listen? Did I stay calm? Did I show respect? Activity: journaling. Participants commit to 1 daily routine where they will apply the guide, e.g., morning team meetings. Toolkit and guide integration exercise. Objective: combine both resources in a scenario. Content. Show how the toolkit provides immediate strategies. Show how the communication guide shapes long-term habits. Activity, group simulation, facilitator presents a conflict scenario. Teams solve it using both resources step by step, then present how they applied the tools. Reflection and closing, commitment to use the toolkit. Objective, end with personal accountability. Content. Importance of consistent practice with tools. Encourage participants to keep the toolkit and guide visible at work/home. Activity, each participant shares one part of the toolkit/guide they will start using immediately. One specific situation where they plan to apply it in the next week.